Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlog Banter. Today, we are talking about video games once again. We're back at it like a terrible habit. This is the worst fucking habit you can get. You know, there's drinking, there's smoking, porn addiction, backlog banter there, right at the top. And today, we're going to be talking about why we love the games we love. You know, everybody's got their own reason for loving games, and that's what we call taste here in the industry. But if you want to talk to us about video games, why you love them, your taste in video games, the things you like, the things you dislike, join our Discord where you can join and put in the BLB submissions channel comments and thoughts that we will be reading in future discussions. We've been doing this pretty consistently, actually. You know, our last few big videos have included a lot of BLB submissions, and I'm kind of digging this. You know, this new strategy we got going here. Building a community, talking to other people.
Yeah.
Never happened before. But Abram, you should subscribe and like the video and
I have.
Yeah, really? Oh.
Well, I have subscribed. I have rung the bell. I will like the video. And if I can do it and I'm a simpleton, you can do it too.
Yeah. You look at us. You know, you're better than us. Well, I hope. Because we set a really low bar.
I certainly hope.
Abram, look, we're saying some gaffes. We're joshing about. But this is serious business. Video games?
Yeah.
I take that matter fucking seriously. Okay? What do you want to start with for video games and why you love them or I love them or ever anyone else in our fucking community loves them?
I want to start with us. I want to start with us. I want to get that on the table. And then I think we can sort of get deeper into our own thoughts through what our community members have to say. And I have to say, Tucker,
a lot of thoughts in our community.
A lot of thoughts. You also said in sort of a jocular manner that this is a serious discussion, but I have to say I kind of feel like it is. I think this is the most I've thought about a discussion before us actually doing it.
Yeah. Even the ones that were your idea, which this one was not.
Right. I usually am like, oh, I got a thought, we got an idea, I'll get to it when we sit down to start. But I've been thinking about this quite a bit because I think it's a really challenging question for me to even answer. Because I found myself trying to come up with definitions for my enjoyment of games, and then testing those definitions against various games that I love.
Yeah, definitely. I was doing the same thing.
And I found that I think the more vague my answer is, the more truthful it is.
Sure. I believe that's true with most things.
Yeah. The more vague you are, the less chance somebody can catch you out for being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Tucker, what I look for in my games is a sense of physical connection to them.
Whoa, okay. All right. You want that IV drip.
Yeah, and it's...
You want it pumped into your veins.
It's... And I feel
Sorry,
like
this is serious. My bad.
Of course, very serious. When we don't... I don't like to joke about IV drips in the first place.
No, yeah.
Not especially in a conversation like this.
What about poison IV drips? Do they do that?
I would like... Never mind.
All right. Continue.
And I'm not sure. I think I still need to refine the exact words I'm using.
Sure.
But to me, I think these conversations often get sort of unfairly boiled down to, do you play video games because you care foremost about story or because you care foremost about gameplay?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a reductive question.
Sure.
Because there's no doubt, and you know this, I would fall on the gameplay side of the equation.
Yeah.
But there's also no doubt that there's a lot of gameplay-driven games that don't do anything for me.
Yeah, definitely.
And we'll talk about some of those. But I think for me, when I look at gameplay and I think, well, what do I like about gameplay so much?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's when in a game builds a physical connection with me that I find it the most compelling. I think one of the big sort of falsehoods in conversations about games is this idea that they are digital.
Mm-hmm.
And now, obviously, games are digital in a very sort of semantics way of speaking.
Yeah.
But I think that we forget that video games are very tactile, not only in the control, but even just in their etymology. Let's look game. There were games that existed before video games, and they were physical. Yeah. And we took the experience of playing a game. We made it digital, but I think sometimes we forget that they remain physical. Their roots remain physical.
Yeah, especially in the physical psychology of your brain, the sort of different neurocenters and endorphins that they're releasing. It is a physical process that makes you enjoy the things that you do.
Yeah,
video games are very good at that.
Yes. And I think for me, I need to be physically engaged by a game.
Sure.
That is ultimately the number one thing I look for and the number one thing I want out of the games that I love.
Yeah.
And I was trying to apply this idea to like The Last of Us Part 2, for instance, which is a game that is very much predicated on mechanics.
Yeah.
Or sorry, very much not predicated on mechanics, predicated on narrative.
Sure.
But even in the case of The Last of Us, I think that its narrative is so strong because it utilizes mechanics in large part to tell its story.
Sure.
But through the actions it forces you to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, the reason I love gameplay ultimately, and the reason why I look for these physically connecting games foremost, is because I think for me, the fastest route to an emotional connection is through that physical connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the medium of games best evokes emotion for me through that physicality.
Yeah.
I think often about Tetris Effect, which to me is the best story that's ever been told in games.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Because Tetris Effect tells a story
when the line cleared, I cried.
A Tetris Effect has actually made me emotional a number of times that I've played it.
No, I know that's an across the board experience. Yeah. I'm just being a shithead.
And I think the reason is because for me, it so acutely understands the ways that the physical experience of aligning your tetraminos and the vibration of clearing a line and the audio-visual experience, all of that harmonizes, I think, in my body in a very visceral way. Mm-hmm. And it communicates a sort of like implicit sense of emotion that I don't think other mediums can really give me.
Sure.
So ultimately what I love about games, why the games I love most are the games I love most, is because they best understand the ways that through the intimate interactivity of the medium and mechanics, we can create this physical, emotional link between the player and the game.
Yeah, that's a very fascinating place to start this because you're right, that's vague as fuck. Because basically, that applies to any game that someone very much connects with. And it is the like base monkey brain reason why we enjoy things, why especially video games, that physical connection, the audio visual sensation of me getting goosebumps when I see Control revealed on Switch. Like this is monkey brain, lizard brain stuff. I don't want to get the goosebumps. It just happens too often. Cartoonishly so. It's a joke among us. But with this conversation, I think that's a great starting point. But for the meat of this conversation, and where my thought process started was a little bit different from that, thinking about the certain elements of games that different people enjoy that lead them to that physical connection. What elements of a game's design or that genre that appeals to you leads you to having that physical connection? Of course, that varies for different people, which is the core of why we're able to have a conversation from various different viewpoints, but still come to the conclusion that games are this physically connecting medium that like transcends other things for us because it's our favorite artistic medium. Yeah,
and no doubt. And the reason I wanted to start there is I almost view it as a block of marble.
Whoa.
If
that one WarioWare minigame.
Exactly. Microgame.
Ah!
The reason I want to start there is because what I basically want to, in this conversation, work my way back to is sort of the set of parameters which define the necessary conditions for me to feel that connection to a game.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like that's my end point, right? And I think you aptly illustrated that's probably the end point for a lot of people.
Exactly,
It's this sort of deeper and maybe less defined, more lizard-brained connection to a game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by defining that as where I want to get to, when I start to say, well, I don't necessarily enjoy RPGs because I feel like the passivity of their gameplay disconnects me on a physical level, we're beginning to sort of like, edge in what I mean and what I need to reach that point of connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so considering we were going to start with our things, I'll just focus in on one element that was part of the reason why I chose this topic as the next base of our conversation, which is this idea of games as something that supports community, which I think is something that is very, very important to me. We were having a conversation in our Discord about this a few days ago. The idea of being in the conversation, is that actually important to the experience of a video game? And to sort of play against a claim that our friend Daniel Navaroli was making, that that conversation is not a part of the importance of games or why it resonates with people. I push back against that because on a very subjective level, the conversation, the community around games is for me the most important part of them. Sure. I mean, that is the reason I love games, of course. I like the games themselves, but it's really the community around them that brings them to the next level, and why I have made almost all of my friends through video games, different video games at different points in my life on different hardware. You and me met through our shared love of video games, primarily collecting video games back in the day, which is not a game design thing, so it doesn't really count, but it kind of does, whatever. Right. But through most of my memories, it is community around video games that makes them stick in my mind as incredibly memorable. Back when I was a kid, elementary school, Pokemon was the first thing that I made friends over. Like, not even close. I don't even know what I talked about to my friends, other than us speculating about what Pokemon Black and White are going to be, and talking about our favorite Pokemon, and carrying our Heart Gold Soul Silver Pokewalkers, and pretending to do battles, and talking about our favorite Pokemon. It wasn't even the game itself that I played for hundreds of hours when I was a child on my little fucking DS, but it was the fact that I could share the community of a game with my friends because we were so all intimately connected to it. We all knew how Sunkern evolved into Sunflora. We all knew that this Pokemon was from Hoenn, this Pokemon was from Sinnoh, yada, yada, yada. Because we loved those games so much, we were able to build a community and make personal connections. And then in middle school, it was Minecraft and Minecraft servers and me making my first online friends and then connecting to my friends through Minecraft over years and years and years. And then Overwatch in high school. And then you and I playing a bunch of Splatoon together. And then even going more current, Animal Crossing New Horizons, and bonding over Elden Ring and learning about Dark Souls lore, and then Tears of the Kingdom just recently. Like, community and conversation and talking to people about these games is a major part, like maybe 40-50% of why I'm so passionate about games. Is playing the game is great. It's awesome. I do it for hundreds of hours, probably more than I should. But then being able to take that knowledge and compare it to others and discuss and debate these things, as I sometimes do even to my own detriment of getting, I get pretty passionate and sometimes angry and frustrated about these things.
Do you really?
It's something that nothing else really does to me, because video games are so, they do support meaningful community interaction in such a unique and acute way. Because everyone's got this personal interaction with it. But then when you share those stories, you can tap in to the other personal connection that someone else has had.
Yeah, I think that's a really important part. And as I was saying to our friend Bro, who I think submitted for this, I'm pretty sure.
He did,
yeah.
Pull up the document.
I have.
Take a look.
I
bolded and underlined every name of every person who submitted. So you do a quick cursory glance, you'll see who is on there. Couldn't be easier.
I was remarking to him about Tunic.
Sure.
And we were talking about this idea that games have never really been a personal experience as much as they've been a shared experience in large part, because Tunic obviously comes from a sort of tradition from the 80s of these sort of parallel play experiences, and parallel play being the idea of like two people enjoying a separate activity and then finding joy in the fact that they're participating in this experience sort of parallel to each other, as the name suggests. And that was obviously intrinsic to so many NES titles that were defining of its era, like Zelda, which greatly inspired Tunic.
But even Pokemon, that is a prime example of that thing. Though it is more interactive. Even if you want to go farther back, the competitiveness of arcade games.
That's what I was going to say.
The only reason that high score games became as popular as they were is because you start with Pong and you're trying to beat your friend at putting the ball in the fucking hole, but then you get Pac-Man and Space Invaders and Donkey Kong and yada yada yada, and you want to one-up your friend. Not because you might want to beat your own high score, but it's spurred on by someone else playing the same game as you, but at a different time, but with that shared link. I find that very fascinating.
Yeah, I think an important component of this is obviously as you're saying, games have not only been designed to be played sort of parallel to each other, but literally in tandem since the beginning of the medium. Because as I was saying, games in the larger non-video sense were never really singular experiences.
Solitaire.
Yeah. So I think it's important to note that intrinsic to the DNA of video games as a sort of mode of artistic expression.
I just realized solitaire is one letter short of solitary.
True.
Holy shit. And it's a game you play by yourself. Oh my fucking god, dude. That's clever as fuck.
That is clever.
Continue.
So I think intrinsic to every game is sort of an implicit desire to participate in a community space.
Yeah.
Now, I think what's interesting about the point about the discourse as this ephemeral idea is that I don't really like to participate in it. And I think this is another point of difference I think we're going to begin to draw in this conversation.
Yeah.
I, like you, most of my very close friends I've made because of video games. No doubt about it. But I love talking to my friends about video games. Yeah. And I love contributing written work and video work to a larger canon. But I find it not particularly motivating for me personally to go out and play a game because it's new, because it's being talked about. I have a very hard time sort of finding an interest personally in doing that.
Not that you won't buy games because of that.
Oh no, I'll buy all kinds of stuff. I'll buy all kinds of stuff because someone I know is interested in something. And I feel left out. But that's because I have bad spending habits.
Yeah.
But I think an important component of my love of games is nonetheless the solitude and the link that exists between myself and the game sometimes. Yeah. Because we're having a conversation in which you got upset with myself and Bro and some other people before Tears of the Kingdom came out when you said, hey, I can't wait to get on a voice call when Tears of the Kingdom comes out. We all play together. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, everyone said no. And I sat there and I was like, I texted Sam and I'm like, will you hang out with me while I play Tears of the Kingdom? And he's like, hell yeah. And then I maybe I'm a saint. I'm a fucking prophet. Some of my best memories with Tears of the Kingdom were me and Joe and Sam and Tanner sitting on a couch making a fucking Korok rocket and shooting it over the thing, going, whoa, and watching the things go. Because that part of community is so important to my experience with that game. And I was trying to recapture, and I think I did, the memories I had with Breath of the Wild, staying over at someone's house and playing it till 3 a.m. and telling each other, okay, go here and do that and all the dragon and dyeing your clothes and all that stuff. That community aspect is part of why I loved those games in particular. And I was reaching out an olive branch that was as quickly slapped out of my hand as it was extended to be like, hey, I want you along on this ride with me.
Yeah, and I think it just speaks to, for me, to elaborate on my disinterest in that, because there have been times when I've played Tears of the Kingdom on a voice call, like when I was laying siege to Laurelin Village on chat, which was sort of fun because I was just largely dicking around and killing bokoblins and updating all of you guys on my progress. And that to me holds a unique sense of fun that I do enjoy. But when I reflect on my favorite games, and part of why, for instance, I played about an hour of It Takes Two with you, and I'm like, I can't do this.
It drove you bonkers.
is because it goes back to this idea of there being this intimacy in the gameplay experience for me. And that intimacy is very important. I liken it actually to working out. Some people
I haven't heard of that game. Is that a PlayStation exclusive?
It's a game. You know what I used to always hate as a kid? Because I grew up, this is tangent, but I grew up in like a rural part of Maine, right?
Yeah,
and if you look at my window, obviously I'm still in it.
Trees are not exclusive to a rural part of Maine.
That's like actually a great point. There was some, I remember, I'll never forget this. There's this kid I met who I'm like, man, what's your favorite game to play? And he told me, my favorite game is the Game of Life, and the graphics are amazing. And I may have annoyed me. So I'm not going to make the same joke. But when I'm working out in the world that exists around the video games, some people really enjoy going to the gym in a group. I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate it. I don't want to work out with anybody. If I arrive in the gym and I see somebody I know, I'll go and I'll say hello, and then these headphones are going in, and I don't want to have a further conversation. Because for me, again, it goes back to this idea of physical process is a very personal experience for me.
Yeah.
And it extends to working out, it extends to creating artwork, it extends to writing, it extends to playing video games. There's
Yeah.
something about me really getting dialed in. And then I love to dial back out and jump on Discord and chat with you and chat with everybody. But for me, there's no doubt a sense of immersion that's important to my favorite games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a good time for us to draw in the ideas and concepts of some of the people on our Discord. And why don't we start? Why don't you pick one to start with? To ease you into it, I underlined and bolded the most important phrases out of each person's contribution. So your little lizard brain's not like, oh, so much text. We will not be reading all of everyone's submission because they were almost all very long, and it's just not efficient for us to do that. But if you are reading this or you're watching this, you can go back on the Discord and find them. It might not be easy, but you could do it.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for these long submissions, especially because I was at the optometrist yesterday and the doctor was late, so I was basically just like lurking the BLB submissions channel and reading these posts. Yeah. But yeah, we're not reading them all here because they're too long. Let's start with Bro because we mentioned Bro.
Yeah.
So we'll pretend that's a segue. It's really not, but his name has been said. So
yeah,
forthcoming comment. So Bro spoke about his enjoyment of games through sort of the lens of Dark Souls, and what I love, Tucker, is that you've made like takeaways. So what beautiful notes! We're both out of school now. Not I have a diploma right there. Not in a single year of my.
I have no fucking clue where my diploma is. I don't. I actually I might have given it to my mom. Maybe this is not a good thing to admit, but I have zero fucking clue where it is.
Mine's on my desk, so I'm like, at least I got something out of those 4 years. But
yeah.
Bro, as Tucker has reduced down to the important bits here, says, I enjoy when a game utilizes techniques or design principles narratively that are removed from film or television. Separate quotation. Yeah. Social messages can be informed by game design in a way fundamentally unique to the medium. I think that's an interesting quotes put together. And then the two sort of high-level Tucker takeaways, trademark it, are one, a game tuckaways, a game forcing you to engage with its satisfying design, and two, utilizing techniques unique to the medium of gaming.
Yeah.
What do we call those?
About this? What?
Affordances. I love that word.
What are you fucking talking about?
I like the word affordance. It's like the media. It's like what's the medium specific elements.
Oh, gotcha. I'm not as media literate as you are, so I sometimes need a little bit of coaxing.
I took one class about adaptation theory, and I've just pretended that I knew more than I do.
Now, what's interesting about Bro's comments here is that one of them actually pertains exactly to what we were establishing initially, which is techniques unique to the medium of gaming is why they're as engaging as they are. That was like the first thing that you said of the physical connection. Interacting with it allows it to be a deeper, more personal experience because you're the one in control. The world does not happen without you, unless you're Animal Crossing or an MMO, I fucking guess. But that idea I think we already covered, but I find his comment about a game forcing you to engage with its satisfying design, that's sort of the summarized tuckaway from this, is fascinating to me because that I think is a part of the reason why I like the games I like, but he like narrowed it down in such a way I was like, I never even fucking thought of that. Because I find that the games that I dislike are the ones that don't make me engage with certain parts of their design. And we've actually talked about this in a few of our reviews, primarily the Halo series and Bayonetta, two franchises that I've played numerous games of but don't connect to on a personal level, mostly because I don't find their combat initially like monkey brain level satisfying, and neither of them forced me to be better at them.
Sure.
And so then I'm just like, I just want to see the next area. Like, I'll just run past the enemies. Like, I'll just mash A and Bayonetta until the guy explodes into a pile of coins. And the game will be over soon, whatever. But for me, I think it actually is primarily because what Bro was saying, these games don't force me to do that. Whereas with some of my favorite games, in order to do anything, I have to, like, invest myself in their mechanics, in their worlds. Something like Minecraft, you have to teach yourself Minecraft. You have to teach yourself what the physics are, what the crafting recipes do, what thing interacts with what, and which way to get anywhere, to do anything. And that is a game that I could tell you everything about.
Yeah.
I know what every block is, where to get it, what the biomes are, what the fucking crafting recipes are. That is a game that I've internalized because through its design, I was forced to internalize all its things.
Right.
It forced me to engage with its mechanics, and the other games that I didn't like as much didn't do that.
Yeah, I think I feel like everything comes back to Tears of the Kingdom right now. But I think part of why I'm having a challenge with Tears of the Kingdom is because, and this is actually something that David Jaffe and Colin Moriarty were talking about on one of the recent conversations, which is this idea that Tears of the Kingdom really rejects this idea of forcing the player to engage with its design.
Sure. Yeah.
And
that's a great point. Yeah.
I was gonna say my friend. I don't know him, unfortunately. I'll just call him a somebody I look up to greatly. Simon Parkin wrote a really interesting piece about
Did
Tears
he
of the
invent
Kingdom.
Simon Says?
I believe Simon Parkin is about 35, so it's unlikely. He might be younger than that, but he writes like a wizened man. So Simon was saying this thing that I found really fascinating, and he phrased this in a way that I thought was really resonant and I hadn't considered before. In Tears of the Kingdom, it's almost like Aonuma and Fujibayashi and everyone are not like watching over you solve any puzzles.
Yeah.
They built a game and they walked away.
Very interesting, yeah.
So, there is a solution to a shrine. There's a solution to a tower puzzle. There is a way to attack a lot of objectives in the game. Very, very clearly. That's laid out to you. But you can, and I feel like the flexibility of the sandbox encourages you to subvert that entirely.
Yeah.
And find another way to go and make your own path. And David Jaffe was remarking that to him, and Simon Parkin was saying the same thing of like, that's amazing design.
Yeah.
And I agree that it shows a great level of confidence to build such an ornate game and then allow the player to not engage, to conscientiously object from so many of its challenges. But as Colin was saying, and I feel like this is becoming more and more true for me, I kind of want an experience that is defined for me. I think that's becoming more important to me as I sort of have less time. And I'm not where I was in 2017, March of 2017, when Breath of the Wild came out and I wanted to go anywhere. Maybe I don't want to go everywhere anymore. And so I agree with Bro, because when I think about many of my favorite games, Star Fox 64 being my favorite game of all time, that is a very tightly designed game. Everything is very closely designed. They understand how you're going to move through a level, and they align enemies and obstacles in a way that you must encounter and you must figure out how to deal with. And I like when I can take a different approach around a challenge, but I like when that is nonetheless still directly tied to the challenge. It's not Breath of the Wild of me saying, or Tears of the Kingdom of me saying, hey, I'm just going to shield grind over to the end of the shrine. I don't want to do the puzzle. I think there's a difference there. And so
there absolutely is.
Yeah, and I agree wholeheartedly with what Bro is saying in theme, although I know he just disagrees with me with the example of Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, that's an interesting one that I maybe want to break down at a later date, or even in the upcoming conversation that I will have with Bro and our friend Brendan Hess, who all three of us love Tears of the Kingdom, unlike you, who's struggling with it. I don't know, little monkey brain, little brain, little shit boy, can't fucking handle it. But I actually do want to draw into conversation a name I just mentioned. Brendan Hess, who did comment. This is his first submission, so thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Brendan. Who said go
follow the crawl. That's makes amazing documentaries. Go follow Brendan.
About not great games, but I digress. Let's read what he says, because it actually ties very closely into what we were just talking about. The idea of the difference between player-directed experiences and developer-directed experiences. Yeah. He says, I can safely say that I find player-directed experiences more compelling than developer-directed experiences. Similarly, I like it when mechanics are treated as a conversation between the player and the content/developer. Basically, I love when a game gives me the space to experiment, get lost, fail, or even miss entire parts of a game. Similarly, I prefer narratives that ask the player to put things together and draw conclusions. The mystery and opportunity for imagination inherent in a hands-off, player-directed approach is very compelling to me, and I find overcoming those challenges on my own very rewarding.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting idea. And I feel like What's the dichotomy? He said it was player driven or developer driven.
Developer driven, yeah. Directed, player directed or developer directed experiences.
Yeah. Okay.
That's one of the tuckaways. So maybe if you'd read them.
One of the tuckaways. Yes, I have. I didn't, Professor. I didn't do my homework.
My dog ate my Google Doc.
Spectrum Wireless tried to eat my fucking Google Doc, but that's a
we won't let
another time.
You will unspool an entire 50-foot Ethernet cable so that Spectrum does not eat your Google Doc.
That's literally, for people watching at home, it's literally what I'm doing right now. But I digress. Yeah, I think this is a really interesting point, and I feel like my philosophy on this has changed over time.
Yeah.
Because there was a time, and Colin made this exact same analogy, so I'm just kind of stealing it from him, but I also agree with it. So he was sort of stealing it through like the brain trust that is people who play games from me.
Sure.
It's actually a little bit different in that he says that for him, Minecraft is an amazing idea, but I think he said the thought of playing Minecraft makes him want to kill himself. I don't remember exactly what his verbiage was, but it's funniest that way, so I'm going to say that's what he said. For me, I used to be a huge Minecraft fan. There's a period of time in my life where that's all I really played. Mm-hmm. That's not the case anymore. I could never see myself going back to Minecraft because that just doesn't really work for me anymore. And I feel like my favorite experiences, in some part, kind of sit in the middle of player directed and developer directed. Yeah. Because I think about a game. I think about a game like, we'll just use Tetris Effect again as an example.
Sure.
That's a very confined experience, right? There's very obviously there's an intent and you play within that set of rules.
It's not an open world Tetris game.
No. But within that set of rules, there's still a lot of flexibility for how I actually approach the gameplay. Yeah. And how I play Tetris. And I find that my favorite games give me the space to experiment, but not enough rope to hang myself with.
Sure. Because to kill yourself when you're playing Minecraft.
Because if they give me the rope and then they give me an open world, I'll just hang myself before I even have to try to engage with it.
Which is usually how you feel when you're playing an open world game. You're like, fuck this.
But I think that Brendan is nonetheless incredibly, salient in remarking about the value of this idea of getting lost.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a really important idea. But for me, my favorite games in which I get lost are games wherein that sense of being lost is deliberate and it's still guided. Yeah. I think about Metroid Samus Returns. Samus Returns is a very linear game, but it has these veneers of confusion.
Sure.
All the progress you make is getting you to the next Metroid, but in the moment, there's this sense of non-linearity. And so for me, I find that I like to straddle this line of this binary that Brendan's created.
Yeah, what's interesting, and I think that this applies to everything we're having in our conversation here, to our thoughts on this, to our everyone in our community's thoughts on what they said or what we're saying, is we all fall in the gray zone on all of this. There are some examples of blank that we love, some that we can't stand, and it might be the same example, but it doesn't work for whatever reason. Nobody likes one thing 100% and dislikes it 100%.
Yeah.
So, and I'm thinking a little bit about my own gray area there, because now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know which side I really fall down on, because, there are games, in one specific example that you and I have talked about multiple times having a disagreement on, the difference between 3D Mario design in Galaxy or Odyssey. One is more developer-directed and one is more player-directed. I fall clearly and squarely on the player-directed side, and it hampers my experience, the game being more developer-directed. However, I also largely prefer linear games, and as I think we'll get to through either me just saying it or someone else's input, story is one of the most important things to me about video games, and interacting with them in a way that a developer lays out for me is one of the most satisfying things that I can imagine. And it's the reason why I sit down and play God of War Ragnarok for 9 hours and get sucked the fuck in and then pop out the other side like, whoa, what the hell just happened? I feel like I got knocked on the head. And it's not because I was able to just do whatever I wanted, but because they grabbed my hand and led me through this experience. And I adore that. I love being led around. But then also sometimes I don't. And maybe now that I'm thinking about it, it comes down on if a game is focused on story, I want it to be more linear. But if it's focused on gameplay, I'd rather have the flexibility to make my own choices, as opposed to being railroaded through things that makes me feel like I'm just going through the motions. I love going through the motions in Uncharted and The Last of Us and God of War and all these games that I adore and think about constantly. But when it comes to a gameplay directed experience, Overwatch, Minecraft, Mario Odyssey, I want to just be let free and make a fucking giant penis out of cobblestone if I want to, and go dick off on the other side of the map in Overwatch and leave my team behind if I so desire. Because those are gameplay directed, and I would rather have that freedom when it's not trying to lead me through something very directly developer intended in terms of a story, which is what appeals to me so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's no doubt a spectrum, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like when I hear developer directed, I'm thinking of like hyper linear experiences, because I wouldn't necessarily think of a game like Star Fox 64, despite it being largely on rails, to solely be developer directed, because there is such a high skill ceiling there, and there are so many choices you are making on a moment to moment basis, even though the game is scripted for you.
Yeah.
And you're forced to engage with it across these various channels. I don't consider that, or maybe I think this is an interesting conversation unto itself, because I almost feel like that it's a continuum from who,
as most things are,
right? Who ultimately has the control, and how obvious are we trying to make this? Now, there's examples where the developer has all of the control, and that doesn't interest me. So we're talking about Quantic Dream, for instance.
Sure.
Which goes hand in hand with narrative, and maybe narrative is a good place to transition this conversation too.
Yeah. But, well, actually, there is one similar comment that actually was the first reply to any of this, which comes from someone completely new to our community, our friend James Halliday, who responded to my tweet, actually, and then he fleshed it out when he joined our Discord, where he talked about the sense of adventure that games provide, and that being something that compels him to want to live in a world and drink it in and explore and enrich himself in the mechanics and everything that has been designed. And he says, while I love a good story, a great game has got to have a real sense of adventure. For example, in The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, there were tons of secrets to be found, bombable walls, backdoors, etc. And then he continues down below when he says, at the end of the day, I want to be rewarded for engaging with the game. If I battle through a dark cavern with enemies, I want the prize at the end that either opens up more things to explore or powers me up so the next big fight is a little easier. Games like God of War Ragnarok, Elden Ring, Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and Metroid Dread are all big AAA games that have nailed this in the past few years. But smaller games like Tunic and Dredge have also found ways to excite me by stimulating my exploration bone. Now, I don't know where that is in the body, but I want to find it. Because I'm also a exploration kind of guy in the sense of gameplay-driven experiences, because for me, rewarding exploration and being tied to compelling world building is another one of my key top things that I look for in my all-time favorite games. The idea of something like Banjo-Kazooie having rewarding collectibles and rewarding you for doing every element of gameplay and really looking through every nook and cranny, that triggers my monkey brain on such an acute level that I got all the achievements in that game in like 2.5 days. Like I was locked the fuck in for that. Or even something like Pokemon. Certain Pokemon only being able to be found in certain areas means I will go over every goddamn inch of every one of these maps and every one of these regions, because I will not have all the Pokemon unless I do that. And it really rewards me for understanding the map, understanding the Pokemon or the Jiggies or whatever, and the mechanics of the world to really just take in the entire thing. And similar to why with Tears of the Kingdom, the first thing I did was go and unlock every one of the fucking towers and then go down the depths and go all the fucking light routes, every single goddamn one of them, because I just needed to have this map like complete in my head, because it rewards exploration on such a physical level, as you were alluding to at the beginning.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I'm really still struggling with what Brandon said. Okay. And I think it's interesting to bring into conversation here, because there's no doubt that it was very deliberate that's what Tears of the Kingdom sort of invites you to do.
Yeah.
I mean, Tears of the Kingdom is a very, very deliberately designed game, in my opinion. I would say that is quite... But it's challenging. I feel like I really need to sit with this idea that Brendan's presented, because I don't know what it really looks like for a game to be driven by the player or directed by the player, directed by the developer.
Mhm.
I don't really know if the developer can direct, at least not in the way that a film director directs. Because if you think about what James is saying here, a game like even Link to the Past, which particularly for its time was especially very, very open,
Yeah.
you would probably make the argument that that's maybe more player driven, but it's also a very closely designed world. I think what's interesting about games is that I feel like if anything, they're kind of co-authorial, and
Yeah.
that
Oh, absolutely.
you really can't have either party, with the exception of true sandboxes like Minecraft,
Yeah.
or true narrative only experiences like Quantic Dream or things like that. I don't think you can really have a game that operates fully and richly without both being in conversation. And I think what James is raising here is a really good example of why. Because when he speaks about this idea of having that reward at the end of the cave, that reward was put there with a purpose, with the purpose of
absolutely.
of making you feel like, oh, I wonder what I'll find in that cave. And then how should we structure that cave so the player thinks that they're navigating it to that end point, but we're actually making sure that they travel there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that the mark of a really good game is when that sort of tandem relationship is maybe not the most obvious. Maybe.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think the continuum that you brought up earlier is where my mind lays on this. I think it is a very compelling question or a concept that Brendan raised, but I think the slider is always on the developer side, at least somewhat. I don't think it's possible to not have it, obviously, but the slider that he's talking about, I think, goes from how much choice do you have within the bounds of that game to very little. In the case of a visual novel, then you get to Quantic Dream, then you get to Naughty Dog, and then you go down the line and you reach Tears of the Kingdom, then you reach Minecraft, and then you reach fucking Roblox or Dreams at the end of that.
Powder Toy.
You're making your own game. Sure, yeah, but Dan Ball Powder Game, yeah. But
Game Boy the Garage.
Jesus Christ, what a cut. I think we should move over to some other elements of game design by bringing into someone else's conversation here. You wanna grab someone else's comment?
Can we actually linger with James for a second longer?
Okay, sure. Sorry, my bad.
No, that's okay. Just because there's another thing I'm really thinking about. This idea of adventure.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I really play a game that doesn't have a sense of adventure. And
you prefer games, is what you're saying?
No, I feel like I rarely play a game that doesn't have a sense of adventure.
Oh, sure.
I'm curious what adventure means to you in this context.
Well, as I linked initially, it is world building and rewarding exploration, because I have found games where I don't feel rewarded with their exploration to have no sense of adventure. Like I'm like, why did I even bother? And frankly, I know this is fucking sacrilegious, but a game that I played recently that I narrowed in on that being an explicit problem that I had was Star Wars Jedi Survivor, a game that has a lot of optional little paths and challenges for you to do. But when I reached the end of those and I found Cal's haircut in a box, I was like, fuck me, I guess. Like I thought I would find something down here, and I found hair in a box, and that was explicitly annoying to me, and it turned me off from that sense of adventure. Is like, why even bother engaging myself with this world or the level design or the exploration or anything if I'm going to end up somewhere and be like, I don't even know why I bothered with that.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I actually agree. I didn't do a lot of exploration in Fall in Jedi Survivor. Beyond just sort of, like a landmark piques my interest, and there's a bunch of B-12 battle droids. I want to go chop them up and see what's going on over there. Yeah. But I found Jedi Survivor to be a very, very adventurous game. And that's part of why it's not only that's actually Pizza Tower is maybe my favorite game of the year. But it's not only one of my favorite games of the year, but just one of my favorite games, period, as is Pizza Tower. But for me, I think you can craft a sense of adventure in a very linear space.
Okay, sure. Definitely possible.
Uncharted is kind of a perfect example, considering it basically is just the tropes of the adventure film narrative in game form. Yeah. But to me, when I think of adventure, I'm not necessarily thinking of when I first went into the depths, or when I accidentally ended up in the catacombs of Elden Ring, like 2 hours into the game. for me, I think of very specific things. I think of shooting out of a launch star in Super Mario Galaxy, and I'm flying high, and I see the planetoid down beneath me that I'm gonna hit, and there's star bits sort of circling around me with me at the Nexus. Or I think about the big beats in Jedi Survivor when I'm fighting that big I forget the name of it, the octopus droid or whatever, the squid droid from Clone Wars, from the Attack of Kamino arc from Clone Wars.
God damn.
To me, sometimes the orchestration of those big moments can be more adventurous for me than...
I mean, that is one of the best moments in the game. Marin
awesome.
giving you her fucking powers and you're going through the goddamn portals. Like, whoa, I'm like, oh, you see Cal's fucking Superman. Call him Kal-El, you know what I'm saying?
Tucker? When you're right, you're right.
Because he's Kal-El. But I think you're right, actually. Yeah. Adventure can be interpreted in different ways. I think that where my mind instantly went was that gameplay sense of adventure being rewarded for exploration and that being the adventure of getting to the destination. But I do absolutely have moments from some of my favorite games, God of War, Uncharted 4, Last of Us Part 2, not Jedi Survivor, where it is something incredibly grand and orchestrated. And do I have much control? Not really. But it does elicit that same sense of adventure because they are crafting this to such an insane spectacle degree that my brain tells me I'm doing something incredible, that I'm going on something that is out of this world ridiculous, even if it is largely just watching a cutscene with minimal interaction or, you know, climbing a giant cliff in Uncharted. It's like, I'm just holding the stick. Like, I'm not technically doing much here, but it's so spectacularly or visually spectacular that it replaces the largely simplified gameplay element.
Yeah, I think for me the sense of visual spectacle in that notion of spectacular is the sense of adventure that I like the most. Because to even bring it to a level of mechanical spectacle, I think about like the big moments in Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, for instance.
Yeah,
like that. I love the Fruity Factory stage, and
probably best level in the game.
Yeah, and the sense of adventure as I'm jumping between these platforms, and it's driven by my skill, and I'm trying to make a risky jump and try to beat a quicker cycle of the platforms or whatever. To me, sometimes adventure can be very small, it can be very big, but I might reject the idea that adventure is kind of solely or primarily even curated by openness. I think closedness can be just as adventurous.
Sure, yeah. I think we should just switch gears fucking completely. I want to go to a shorter one that our friend Eric left, and he kind of did his own tuckaways, which I appreciate here. He gave a few points. His reasons for loving the games that he does and being so engaged by his favorite games are, 1, having great music, 2, having a good level of challenge, whether that is very hard or not too easy on the spectrum of that. A game being very unique and a game being highly replayable. All of those being elements that he really looks for in the games that grab him and can take him on adventures or not adventures, or I don't even know where you come down on adventures now that we had that conversation, for hours and hours and hours at a time.
No, I'm curious what you think about this, because I know that there's at least 2 things in there that you specifically are not looking for in your games.
Yeah.
Or don't care about, maybe.
Well, what's interesting, actually, is its balance. Within his 4 points, there are 2 that are explicitly my favorite things in games, and 2 that I could not give a single shit less about.
Right.
And is there one of those that you want to focus in on? Because that you have thoughts about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would address challenge and replayability in a similar way.
Sure. Let's go for that.
I don't really like overly hard games, frankly.
Yeah. Neither do I. Notoriously so.
Yeah. Like, I played Sekiro for a couple hours and like, this is awesome, and I wish that I was better at this game so I could play it, but I'm not, so I won't.
Yeah.
What I look for is not necessarily challenge, but room to improve and satisfaction in the difficulty.
Yeah.
Or I take it to the idea of working out, right? I do the same repetitive motions every single day. And they're not hard motions. I increase weight to make them more difficult, to match where I'm at the moment.
Yeah.
But I don't go to the gym and I'm like, I'm going to try to do something that I don't think I'm going to be able to do, which is sometimes what a FromSoft game can feel like to me.
Sure. Oh, interesting, yeah.
But I also go to the gym over and over because I like building up that sense of mastery.
Yeah.
And so for me, mastery and difficulty are different. And mastery invites replayability. Because like part of the I replayed Sonic Mania, and that was super fun because I played on the Encore mode, which is in the Plus DLC, which is much harder than the core game. And it was fun for me to take those skills that I've accrued over past playthroughs and kind of meet me where I'm at now, which is I'm good at the game, so I need something a little bit more. And now it's really mechanically rich and satisfying and interesting for me.
Yeah. And that's also something that you've done with your Halo replays, is bump up the difficulty. So because it's not your first time playing through it, you know what to do a little bit better. The game pushes back at you, sort of meets you at your level. And I find that to be a very compelling concept for other people. And that's something that makes me very distinct as a game player. I have no drive for self-improvement. And what that says about me as a person in my actual life, hard to tell.
Well, I mean, I've known you for many years now, and I know for a fact that's true in your personal life as well.
Ding! Ding. Yeah, you know. I was going to go down a route we're not going to go down. But difficulty in games is something that I've always had a hard time reconciling, because on that very subjective monkey brain level, it's something I find so unappealing that for the longest time I had a hard time understanding why other people enjoyed it. And I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why would you play Dark Souls? You're not getting anywhere. It's fucking beating your ass and you're not making progress, and that sucks. And because that is largely, although there are now exceptions to that I have played and loved games like Elden Ring and Dark Souls and Bloodborne, but for the 99.9% of games that I have played and loved, I play them on the easiest difficulty. I usually play on story mode, but or if there's a difficulty option, I don't play on story. I just play on easy, or I tick down the sliders, or I give myself more health. Because for me, the power fantasy of a video game is about not being challenged, about overcoming obstacles at a clip that makes me feel like I'm making consistent progress. And of course, there's different kinds of progress internally. You can feel, okay, I did 50% on this boss on my first try, and then I got 60%. No, that's progress. I can feel myself learning the dodges and the timings and their attack patterns. That is a form of progression. But for me, the way that I enjoy games, that mechanical and technical mastery is not something that appeals to me in the slightest, and is why I find games that you might find to be highly, highly replayable and interesting because of the level of improvement that they allowed for to be repetitive. I'm like, I've fucking seen this before. Like, I played level 1 of Pac-Man. I gotta do it again because I died? God damn it. Or even games that aren't arcade high score based, which is specifically something I have no appeal towards. But even a game, as we referenced, Super Mario Galaxy, a game that is largely linear in its stage design, and I think to myself, I've done this before. I'm just going through the motions, because that form of linearity and technical mastery does not appeal to me on such a subjective level that it actively disinterests me from wanting to go back and replay that. And so, on that same coin as you were talking about, the difficulty of the game and the replayability of it are two things that don't factor in to my favorite games. There are a scant few that I have replayed, and even then, it's like max 2 or 3 times, which is just not how I operate as a game player. Of course, that might shift over the course of my life, but as it stands now, it's something not inherent to the way that I consume games or am very passionate about the games that I love.
Yeah, it's a super interesting. I think the idea for you of the power fantasy being decoupled from difficulty it makes total sense, but it's super interesting because I kind of feel the inverse way.
Sure. Yeah.
In that the reason that I really enjoy playing Halo on heroic opposed to like playing it on normal, legendary is too much. It's too much for me.
You'll get there someday, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, legendary is kind of more of like a co-op situation anyway. I need to find. Yeah. I should like play co-op legendary with like Ben Hayhoe, because I don't think you would want to play. Halo
that would require legendary. You playing a game in co-op, though. You ever think about that problem?
But it's Halo, so I might be able to make an exception.
I see.
But for me, I feel a greater degree of satisfaction personally when I revisit that game on that higher difficulty and I get through it. Or when I sit down to play Sin and Punishment, I'm sitting down to play Sin and Punishment more than once.
Yeah, sure.
Like I'm not sitting down.
Have you actually done that? Played the game multiple times back to back?
Yeah.
God damn.
Because I don't.
Sorry for your loss.
Because I'm not sitting down to see the end of Sin and Punishment and say, okay, I saw the end of Sin and Punishment. I'm sitting down to say, yeah, and it's a different mindset, because to me, I sit down and say, okay, I want to get a little bit better. I want to get this much further without dying. Same with Ikaruga. It's the same with a number of games for me. And it goes back to what I think I said at the beginning. For me, that gets me so close to the experience, and it forms that physical bond with me, because then there is this genuine physical engagement with the game of it's a muscle I'm building and refining and improving, and in the process I sort of get get to enjoy the music, to Eric's point, because I love a good soundtrack too. Get to enjoy the music and the sights and the sounds and the nuances of the gameplay on, for me, a deeper level, a more intimate level. And so that tactile punch of an S7 sniper rifle shooting an elite, and that experience of that loop and refining that loop, to me is where I get closest to a game. And
actually, I just want to bring into conversation a very similar point that our good friend and BLB intern Abby said. He said, "Well, I enjoy a good story. I feel in the end, games like Smash Brothers have that really deep / engaging gameplay system that never make me bored. And these are things that I value a lot in my games." And I think this is similar to what you were saying, a game giving you that wiggle room to improve, and that being the primary reason that you engage with games. And I find it interesting and sometimes, frankly, internally frustrating to say that I play my games on easy and everyone's like, they give me the fucking rock eyebrow, like, boom, what the fuck's wrong with you? Like, games are supposed to be hard. Challenges why we live as human beings. I'm like, well, that's not necessarily true. And I think that to hone in a little bit on my power fantasy element, it is the idea that I am consistently progressing through a level. Maybe I have to retry it once or twice. Maybe I have to die in a battle and then beat it on my second or maybe third try at maximum. More than that, I'm fucking out. But the idea that I have conquered it on my first try, that is the power fantasy. Is I understand video games enough and understand the mechanics of this game enough that I didn't have to retry it. And to me, that is more on a guttural level satisfying, because then I get to see what's next, which is frankly... And we have this conversation about me not replaying games, not preferring longer games. That is another element of games, or me consuming art, whatever, is moving on to the next thing is sometimes more fascinating than I'm fucking doing. And that is just a very, like, the way my brain is wired. But playing on easy allows me to do that. I'm able to experience the game as the developer intended, with the challenge and playing through the level. I don't, like, skip around things. But I'm able to do it without that halt, without feeling like I hit a wall and have to stay at this wall until I'm able to climb over it. I'm just fucking busting through that wall on my first try. I'm like, look how fucking cool I am. I bust out that wall on my first try. I'm the goddamn greatest. Which is maybe why beating Ornstein and Smo in Dark Souls on my first try is my favorite memory from any of those games, because that's a notoriously hard boss. And I beat it on my first try. I have no fucking clue I beat it on my first try. But that is my favorite memory of those games, because I didn't have to sit there and beat my head against it for fucking ever. I just did it on my first try. I'm like, I'm awesome. This is great. I can't believe I fucking did that.
And I think it's important to just go back to what I said before of, like, I'm not looking to... I don't want to beat my head against the wall. That's not fun either. You're
closer to that than I am. But still not all the way to your head being bloody.
Oh, no, it's not caved in. I mean, sometimes... sometimes I speak as though I'm concussed, but it's... I am fine, technically. I like that challenge
on a medical level.
On a medical level, well, I like certainly on a psychological level. I like when I can follow that the challenge can follow me. Perhaps I think that's the way to put it, and why I couldn't get into Sekiro.
Perfect encapsulation. Of what you said, if you will. Kind of on the other side, actually, our good friend Phil, quote unquote, the Pill, says. I think that it's the confluence of story design and gameplay loops. An addictive gameplay loop is the basic lizard brain level at which I get hooked on the game. But after a couple days, I can detach from it unless there's also a story/aesthetic, I would assume, which invites me and lures me back. And this I find fascinating, because I think it's on the exact opposite side of the coin of what Abby was saying, of a story is great, but he wants a compelling gameplay loop that he can improve at to continue to bring him back and back and back. And I side more with Phil here of gameplay is great, but I gotta have a reason to want to engage with that gameplay on a deeper level, to see the next thing, to experience the entire game. I need to be invested in this world, which is why I placed so much emphasis earlier on world building. On, if you know me, lore. Jesus Christ. Lore might be my favorite thing in media, and being able to immerse myself in the story of a world, even if it's not necessarily the cutscenes that they're giving me, but this was placed here for a reason because the story dictated it to be this way. My character is doing this one thing because, of course, gameplay and story feed into each other in crazy ways. But in my mind, the story dictates what the game is able to do on a gameplay level. And I want to be first hooked on the story and invested in the characters and want to see them grow and gain abilities and conquer the next thing because I care about this person and the journey and I find the world fascinating. Not because I am a game player, I want to be better at the game, and therefore the character just, by default, because I'm playing them, gets better. There's a very different balance there that I side more on what Phil was saying.
Yeah, there's an idea I want to bring in here, which is another core pillar of the games that are the most special to me, which is this idea of imagination. I think that imagination to me is so important to a good game. If a game does not evoke or does not sort of spark my imagination, it's probably not going to move the needle much for me.
Doesn't spark joy.
Does not spark joy. Marie Kondo moment. Now, I do like a traditional narrative. I mean, obviously, I love Last of Us. I love Citizen Sleeper. I love Immortality. Well, Immortality is a little more of a subversive narrative, but it is still narrative focused.
Absolutely.
Or even Halo, right? Halo is a very gameplay-driven experience, but it also has a deliberate narrative, and I do enjoy that. But when I think about probably my favorite game narratives, I think about, and you're going to fucking stick with me for a second. I think about Pikmin and Pikmin 2. Have some of my favorite game narratives. And on a plot level, Pikmin has an inciting incident and a conclusion.
Yes.
And that's basically it. Pikmin 2 is fun because every day you learn about how the president of Hocotate Freight is becoming more and more destitute through emails, which I love. I fucking love those emails from the president. But to me, this is where the idea of imagination comes in.
Yeah.
The story of Pikmin 2 is going down into the cave with the big queen Pikmin who looks like a big sausage loaf and just rolls back and forth.
Not Pikmin. Bulborb.
Sorry, that's what I meant to say. I apologize.
I didn't want to even be confused.
No. It was... Thank you. Yeah. When you find her and she just rolls over your...
What was that?
I dropped my ring light. Rolls over your Pikmin and kills like 60 of them. For me...
Jesus Christ, yeah.
That's the story of Pikmin 2. Because when that happens, it gets my mind going.
Yeah.
It was not a cutscene wherein Olimar enters a cave. His Pikmin die, and then I have to react to this moment. What I'm reacting to is a chain of gameplay events. And what those gameplay events are triggering, because Pikmin is such an endearing world, it's triggering me to think, oh man, I just lost all these Pikmin. I love these Pikmin. Now they're gone. But now I got to rebuild my Pikmin. How am I going to go about doing that? And now suddenly I have this very personal vendetta with this enemy. And now this is a moment. This isn't an antagonist that the game is telling me that I need to care about. This is a creature that has fundamentally and personally wronged me. And now I'm building a narrative in my head.
Sure.
And to me, the best game stories have my imagination working in that way. And they're things that I project into there. And so for a while, for as much as I love a traditional narrative, and there are numerous across the medium that I do love, it's when I make the story that I find myself most compelled.
Yeah, absolutely. And there certainly are examples of games where that is the case for me. And it's interesting because it is the most open games and the ones where I have the most player expression where that is the case. It is the 4 different servers that I was on for years in Minecraft that I could tell you the entire history of. The towns that I built, and I built them in this way with this material in this place, and these people came in and moved in and built their own thing. Or in a game like Tears of the Kingdom, my foremost memory in that game is not the narrative of the game, but me playing with the mechanics in a unique way that not only sparked my joy, but sparked the joy of my mom, who was like, what are you doing there? The core example being, I needed to get a stack of logs down the hill, or a stack of logs down the hill. And I was like, I don't want to hold them over my head and walk down. That's kind of lame. So I made a car out of logs. I just put wheels on the sides of a stack of logs, and I drove a thing of logs down the hill. And then they split open, and I gave them to a guy. I'm like, there you go. And that was not a story moment. It was my own player expression and the sort of emergent moments that game allows for that built that. But I for me, those are the few and far between ones.
Sure.
I struggle to remember specific moments of gameplay because I'm not a gameplay first guy from most of my favorite games of all time. When I think about a game like Thomas Was Alone, which is arguably a gameplay first game. Actually,
I wouldn't
that
say
may
it
not be
is.
maybe I made a bad example, but a game like Mario Odyssey or Pokemon Moon. I love these games, and I played them for the gameplay and staying in their worlds and exploring everything and 100%ing as I did both those games. But I couldn't tell you a specific moment of their
Sure.
gameplay. Like, I didn't have a crazy moment like, I can't believe I did that. But I still primarily love their gameplay. And so I think that's why the few moments with things like Tears of the Kingdom and Minecraft that stick out to me are even more special and
Yeah.
break into that upper echelon of my favorite games of all time. But for me, it is primarily a game telling me a story with characters. Characters are what endear me to basically anything and everything, and getting to know a fictional person on a personal level and what their strengths and weaknesses and worries and abilities are, that is what invests me in mastering the gameplay, because I'm like, I want to see them get good. And therefore, I have to be the one that,
I love that
does
idea.
it. Because they don't do it themselves. Because a game doesn't operate without interaction. So yeah, I definitely fall on the more story evolves the gameplay for me. Though, of course, as I noted, there are exceptions to that.
Yeah, I love that idea of you wanting to see the character succeed. I think that's super cool.
Yeah.
The point about Tears of the Kingdom is well taken, and I definitely agree. And I've got a lot more of those moments from Breath of the Wild probably than Tears of the Kingdom. But
Sure.
emergent game design, I think, is amazing. It's just unfortunate that most of the time, emergent design principles are applied to games that I'm maybe not particularly interested in.
Yeah.
But I think sort of when a game just lets me project myself into anything, I really enjoy. I mean, I really like, for instance, and this is quite strange that I do this maybe, but when I play Star Wars Battlefront 2, the 2005 one, I find that it is such an exciting set of mechanics and such an exciting game that I'm very good at. I pretend that the unit I pick is a real soldier, one of one. Not my avatar. They're an actual Rebel Alliance trooper.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I want to see them survive until the end of the game. Because I can play Star Wars Battlefront 2 and not die. Because I can close my eyes and draw out every single map and menu in that game and what every unit starts a battle with. So it gives me this opportunity, because I'm so invested in this play space, to invest myself further in it.
Yeah, definitely. We actually have a couple comments that comment on something of this sort, and I think what's interesting is we can bring in a genre that you and I are not particularly in love with, but do have some examples, which is TRPG. Role-playing games are the perfect example of this, and part of the reason why I'm excited for Starfield and why I loved a game like Skyrim or Fallout 4 is because they explicitly ask you to do that, is to create your own path through a world and build the narrative of a character that you name. You have to make a whatever the fuck hideous character in Fallout, and you build their story. You design their path. And let's bring in our not good friend, because he just joined, so I don't want to go that far yet, but an acquaintance of mine, Mr. Murph of the Daydreamcast, also hosted by. Hey, he'll get there someday. Murph, if you're listening, you might be a good friend one day, but I just don't want to put the power to your head. Murph says, I gravitate towards games that give me the tools to construct my own narrative with the action. This can be as simple as giving me dialogue options with ramification, TM. But it also means having the gameplay itself feel like choices I'm actively making. When I play, say, a Pokemon game, I am mentally animating the Pokemon animated series, starring my character and their journey through whatever region it is. Same goes for games like XCOM or Fire Emblem. Beyond their role-playing mechanics, there is dynamism to the gameplay that allows for an ebb and flow of conflict that feels very narratively satisfying. And that's absolutely something that I find myself doing in rare examples where I get very invested in an RPG. But games like Fire Emblem and Pokemon, as he mentioned, are games that spark that in me. I build my team. I always create a character, a unique character. I come up with a new name. I design them very differently. I always flip-flop what gender of Pokemon character that I'm playing, and they have their partner Pokemon. And they did this in this world in this way, and I'm building their story. or Fire Emblem to a significantly lesser degree. But when I played Three Houses and got so invested in... Actually, no. A better example, Awakening. When I played Fire Emblem Awakening and I got this big group of people, I gave them pairings so that they would have children so I could have more people. But then I locked those fucking in. I was like, Donald and like a big strong woman, Donald simps so fucking hard for this woman. And there's no fucking chance they would be with anyone else. Because I built that narrative. I had them next to each other in the battles all the time so their heart level would go up and I could see their interactions. But it was the role playing that I did, making those choices where I'm like, these characters are so fucking in love that it could not happen any other way.
Fire Emblem is such an interesting example for this conversation. Because I think it highlights our key difference of opinion here. Because I feel similarly about Fire Emblem, but I only play with permadeath. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a little bit more closely aligned with what Murph is saying of the gameplay informs the story. Because when my unit's dead, they're dead. And now my story changes. And for me, that sense of stakes is really, really exciting. Yeah. And why I enjoy permadeath. It is actually for sort of a narrative function. Because I come to care about these characters and then I fuck up and I kill them and that's on me and that's an emotional experience. Yeah. So I think that's super interesting. Yeah. When the gameplay is able to mold story in a unchangeable way. And it goes to the dialogue options. You were surprised recently when I said that I like to pick up a lot of shit. Like I like when the game is pick up a lot of stuff. Yeah.
I think you mentioned it while we were watching Starfield and like you can pick up anything and like put a fucking giant pile of sandwiches in your ship if you want to.
I really like Cyberpunk, as people know. Yeah. I really like Knights of the Old Republic, as people know. And I really like the Outer Worlds. Because to me, those are games of a perfect size. Yeah. They're not especially long. They're each about 20 hours for the critical paths. There's so many dialogue choices I can make. I love dialogue choices. And because it takes the principles of the emergent gameplay and the player-driven experience that you're talking about in these really big games, and puts them in this perfect-sized experience for me.
Yeah, you have 2 to 4 options, and that's a good amount of options, but it's not 40 options.
No, I've got enough options to take agency over the situation, and the end goal is maybe 2 weeks of my life away. Like that's perfect. If Starfield comes out and I have to play 60 hours to reach the end of the critical path, I probably won't see it through.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's an interesting element that I didn't note down on my notes. And I don't think really anyone brought up, even though I mentioned it as one of the possible elements of why certain games appeal to certain people. But is game length is something that I'm acutely aware of to maybe a nauseating degree. But I think about the games that are my favorite and the ones that I seek out playing. It is ranging from largely microscopic 1 to 2 hour games, which I adore, or games that are longer but still in my mind incredibly manageable. That 10 to 12 hour sweet spot, maybe 15 if I'm feeling lucky, is like that's a weekend. I immerse myself in this world. Maybe it's over the course of 5 days or 7 days. I'm feeling lucky. But it doesn't last so long that I get distracted by something else. That is where the biggest games lose me. And why I don't gravitate towards JRPGs, largely. Or RPGs in general, because they're games that want you to spend incredibly long amounts of time in the world, not only by offering you a lot of side content and giving you a big world to explore and lots of upgrades and items and options, but because usually they have just a lot of story. Like they got a lot of cutscenes and dialogue that you got to tap through, and you have to do these things in order to see the credits roll. And for me, seeing the credits roll and experiencing that in a manageable amount of time is incredibly important to my core experience. And it's why one of the most beloved games of all time, Persona 5, I finished that game, but I do not think about that game. I do not consider it as highly as other people did, because I had to put like a month of my fucking time into that. And by the end of it, even though, the ending's fine, I like seeing them like go off into the sunset. And actually, I want to bring in Andrew's point here, because he said this almost exact same thing. Yeah. I don't care about that because I was annoyed by that point. I'm like, and you've said this exact same thing. If Persona 5 was 20 hours, it might be my favorite game of all time. I love its aesthetic. I love
Yeah.
the world. I love for me, it's the role playing of going to class and building up the social
It's very
stats and all of
fun.
that. But by 80 hours, I didn't care anymore. I was tapping through things like, okay, all right, get it over with. Come on. And that's why I don't gravitate towards long games.
I don't either. I like games that I can play for a long period of time, but that are not long themselves. I accumulate playtime in like chip damage.
Sure.
Mario Kart, Halo,
Yeah.
Splatoon, Smash Brothers, Tetris Effect, any game like that I can return to is perfect for me. I'm feeling that with
back in the day, Overwatch,
Minecraft, Destiny. There's so many examples of it. I'm feeling this with Tears of the Kingdom right now, where I'm like, people keep telling me that this Ganondorf fight is fucking amazing, and that the last couple hours of the game are fucking amazing, and I have no doubt that they are, and I want to get to them right now.
Yeah,
but I can't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have time anymore. I have the job. I have things to do, and it's just I don't want to play a game for even 50 hours.
Yeah,
which is not a huge period. Which is not a huge amount of time when you consider that I probably play 20 hours of games a week or more, right?
Mm-hmm.
I could spend 2 weeks and knock. I could knock out Tears of the Kingdom in 2 weeks if I wanted to.
Yeah,
but that's a lot because I view it like you as some of the partially the opportunity cost of.
Yeah, definitely.
I can go full bore in Tears of the Kingdom, but I feel like I know how I feel like I know how I feel about Tears of the Kingdom, and I think that those last couple hours are going to change my mind. But I think the hours between now and those final hours are going to sour me. So the ending hours maybe going to bring me back to where I am now.
Yeah,
I
think golden pathing it over a long period of time would make Tears of the Kingdom a perfect experience for you, because I think a lot of the curated content, as you have experienced for that game, is very well done, and you're enjoying it. And the side content is just pretty much superfluous. Like you do not have to do that. And I find that idea very fascinating because it's also something that I struggle to find myself doing. There are games in the past that I've played like that, as I mentioned, games like Overwatch and Minecraft, and when I was playing Pokemon for hundreds of hours, those are games that I would play over the course of years of my life. But I don't think there has been a game in the last 6 years of my life that I've done that with.
Done what with exactly?
Play over a long period of time, continually check back in on, and build up that hundreds of hours play clock. Not because I binged it in fucking 2 weeks, but because I continued to revisit it.
Krong is the last one for you, probably.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Animal Crossing being... You motherfucker. Translated, he was referring to Animal Crossing New Horizons, which, yes, you're absolutely right, was definitely the last game that I did that with. Fucker. Because that game incentivizes you to check back in every morning in a way that I don't find a battle pass or a new set of weekly or daily objectives to be something that I am compelled to go back in on. But my crops have grown, or I can now sell something for X amount of bells, or new fish is available on day 1 of the month. I'm like, hot diggity! I'm waiting till 12 a.m. and I'm up there with my fucking fishing rod. I'm like, yeehaw! But I can't. No other games really grind me like that anymore, and it's why I am hesitant to get into multiplayer games that require that kind of investment, and even why I don't go back to Splatoon 3, which is one of my favorite games of all time from the time I spent with it in multiplayer, but primarily the single player, because I don't have the mind of returning to things anymore that I definitely did used to have. And I think you're also in a similar boat of that used to be something where we would do constantly, but it's floating away from me. You're certainly more in that camp, but that train has almost completely left the station for me.
Yeah, I mean, for me it hasn't, because I've been, because of course I have been. I'm counting down the days right now until June 20th, which is when Season 4 of Halo Infinite begins.
Yeah.
And they're adding Infection, baby, fucking finally. It should have been there at launch, but now we have Infection.
Abram just can't wait to be infected. Medically.
And this goes back to my point of the games that I can accumulate time in over months.
Time.
Because I can jump back into Halo Infinite, and it's going to take an evening for me to get the rust off, but then I'm going to be back to where I was.
Of course.
Splatoon, I've played so much Splatoon. I play one round of Turf War, and I'm back in the mix, right?
Of course.
And so it's really easy for me to do that, and it's more satisfying for me than for you, I think, because I like that notion of mastery, as we talked about before.
Yeah.
If that's not there for you, there's really nothing to write home about. There was one other thing I wanted to say on this point, and I have it. Hold on. Give me 30 seconds.
Do you want to go back to it?
No,
you can just interrupt.
It's important to the game length conversation. Got it. Thank you. Yes.
Boom.
The idea of side content, I think, is super interesting. I don't play games for side content, even the ones I love the most. And the reason being is because, and I think I'm just hung up on what Brendan said. I'm really continuing to think about this. Mm-hmm. But I want to play with...
That's what that man does.
Yeah. I want to play what the developer put forth for me.
Yeah.
To me, and this is not true. I know that this is objectively untrue. Mm-hmm. But to me, if something's not on the core path, it's not actually critical to the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you play a game, you play CD Projekt Red's games, and you have an immediate refutation of this because the side quests are maybe better than the core quests. I mean, there's plenty of RPGs where that's the case. But for me, I love Sin and Punishment because there is not an ounce of fat on that game.
Yeah.
Everything there has a purpose, and you see everything that Sin and Punishment has to offer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's the same for Sonic. It's partially why I think I gravitate so much to Galaxy. Because I see it. I can make choice about which galaxy I go to, which star I do. But when I'm in a star, when I'm doing that, I'm doing the star. And it's important, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
When I'm playing... I feel like I'm ragging on Tears of the Kingdom. I think it's an amazing game.
You can say whatever you want here. I can't hit you. I would.
Yeah.
But I can't, unfortunately.
It's an amazing game. I just feel like... I think Tears of the Kingdom has been a great case study for me and how my case has changed. I think that's what the game has become.
Sure.
Because when I see somebody standing in a town and they've got the little red dot with the exclamation point above their head, I'm like, you have a side quest.
Mm-hmm.
Walk past.
I do not want to talk to you.
I don't want to clog it up my map.
You're that kind of person.
Yeah, I don't want it in my log. I don't want any of that. If you don't have a little thing above your head, I'll come talk to you and find out what funny fact you have for me.
Sure.
But I don't want you to leave it on something that is not being considered critical. And again, I know that this is objectively not true. But for me, in my head...
It's experientially true.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly important. I don't want to undersell that. It's something that we've wrestled with in our reviews, in our debates, is this idea of something being experientially true is maybe the most important thing, frankly, to experiencing any kind of art. I reviewed this morning The Flash with Tanner, a movie that he gave a 1 out of 10 and I gave a 7 out of 10, a movie that I thought had great performances and was funny and had interesting action, and he disagreed on all of that. And it had the same objective content, but experientially, he found the jokes annoying. I didn't. And so I thought the jokes were good. The jokes made him want to jump off the top balcony of the fucking theater. He wishes he was at the top of the screen and could go to the bottom of the screen in 10 seconds, in 3 seconds. But I think the importance of something being experientially true is very important. And actually, I want to bring in my last personal element that I wrote down. Is the idea of a game having that imagination and creativity that you were mentioning earlier, but having a unique factor. Me feeling like I haven't experienced something like this before is, on a large scale, very important to me. Of course, there are sequels to games. There are genres of games that I'll play multiple games in, and of course, that will only become more true the more games I play, and the older I get, the more experience I have. But I find certain games, no matter their objective qualities, the influence that they had on the industry, the tightness of their design, to be experientially not very interesting, because I feel like I've played other examples.
You can say it.
That Halo.
No, you know what I'm
Metroid.
Thinking. There we go. You can say it.
I'm sorry, the M word has been said. These games are factually important and factually well designed, but on a very subjective, experiential level. Wait, redacted. On a very subjective, experiential level, I felt like they weren't new. When I went through, I'm like, I've seen this done before, and in my opinion, done better, and it makes them not stick in my mind. But I can also see the opposite side of the coin. Like if I open my third eye, I can fucking see it. If I was a kid in 1994 or whatever when Super Metroid came out, and I played it, I'd be like, they fucking did this? Jesus Christ. Because it was the first time that was done. And it's part of the reason why I have a hard time enjoying older games on that kind of level, because they have been so influential and they have splintered into all these things, and their importance can be felt in so many places. But to me, it feels experientially not unique.
Yeah.
And I search for that uniqueness, which is why when I play Immortality, I'm like, this can be done? Or I play Katamari and I'm like, I don't even know what genre of game this is.
Yeah.
These are the games that stick with me the hardest because they did something that I have never experienced before. And that experientially unique factor is, as I said initially, maybe the most important thing for a game connecting with someone on a very personal, a physical level that we were talking about initially.
Yeah, there was a period of time when I was newness above everything. And I still no doubt feel that way in part. But I think maybe what I might be looking for more than newness now is advancement. Let's move forward.
Yeah, definitely.
And sometimes moving forward is not the same as being new. Thinking about like Donkey Kong's games, right?
Yeah.
Donkey Kong Jungle Beat is a unique and new Donkey Kong platformer.
Yeah.
Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is moving forward what Retro was doing in Returns.
Yeah.
And I think that there's days when I wake up and I want that thing that's totally bizarre and zany and fun and different. But there's days when I just want the best game.
Yeah.
And I think that there's sometimes a sweet spot to hit. Like,
definitely.
Like for me, God of War Ragnarok was not going to be interesting because I already didn't really vibe with what God of War 2018 was doing on a personal level. So there was nothing that game was going to be able to, like, by being more of that, it wasn't going to move the needle for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
No doubt that that's the better game. Sony Santa Monica.
Well, some people disagree with that. I wouldn't say it's a clear thing. Although I would say it's a clear thing.
Or I'll put it this way: Sony Santa Monica spent years refining and advancing that formula in the direction they felt was the way to go, and make the mechanics tighter, figure out this pacing, the story better. I mean, I haven't played them, so these might not be true. The pacing might be worse. The combat might be worse. I don't know.
Some people say it's worse. I disagree, but
there's no doubt about this. So Sony Santa Monica took what they had in 2018 and tried to walk it forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
I look at a game like Mario Golf Super Rush and it's disappointing because I look at Mario Golf Island Tour and that was so much richer. Feels like we're regressing. It's the point of regression that I think I chafe at more than the lack of originality, maybe.
Absolutely. And I think that balance is the most important thing because I actually went on record about 3 weeks ago saying the exact opposite thing of what I was just saying about newness. Is I made a tweet with Ellie going, ooh, yes, to the idea of a developer taking a great game and releasing a sequel that makes it just better in every way, in my opinion. It was spurred on by Tears of the Kingdom, a game that I have expressed has decreased my appreciation of Breath of the Wild because I believe that Tears of the Kingdom does everything Breath of the Wild does, but just better. Same with God of War Ragnarok and Last of Us Part 2. The same crayon drawing thing that I said. Splatoon 3, down the line. Portal 2. I want that sometimes, and I crave that, and it ends up with some of the best experience I've ever had. So again, it's always in the middle. There's never a full one or the other. I think what's interesting is I crave newness regardless if it is an experience that I haven't had before or if it's literally new, like it came out recently. I really gravitate towards trying new games because I find something so fascinating about being in on the ground floor. Like I played God of War Ragnarok the week that it was released, and only a select group of people can say that. And I had this information but before anyone else. Same with Tears of the Kingdom, yada yada yada. That's why I love playing new games and exploring the new parts of the industry. And lacking that, I look back on games that were influential, but maybe not experientially new because they've been so influential, It's a really bizarre balance that I struggle with in my own mind sometimes of like trying to fully express that. But I think I've maybe some nice groundwork here.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on that? There are 3 more comments I think I kind of want to just go through kind of quickly, maybe not give the full reverence that maybe they deserve, but we are going long in the tooth.
I'm glad you illustrated what that means.
Any final thoughts or move on to those?
No.
God forbid. Andrew, actually one of the first people to respond to this, and of course, one of our actually good friends, sorry Murph, says, as the resident Mr. RPG around here, although that is in contention now with Brendan Hess on the server, says, I have to say that the elements that keep me engaged with the games I like are many. And I'm just going to go through his... I'm going to go through the bullet points here. Stats, he loves seeing numbers go up on a screen, progressing a character, have the numbers getting bigger, so when you're at the end of the game and you're doing 900,999 damage, that gives him a huge amount of happiness. He loves strategy and tactics in RPGs through the lens of party and units and deciding what a group of characters is doing. The story and characters, which is actually where I was going to bring in his comment earlier when we were talking about Persona 5, because he mentions... when I finished Persona 5 Royal after 150 hours, I felt like I was saying goodbye to these really good friends that I had made over summer break. I was genuinely sad and happy it was over. I almost had a parasocial relationship with these characters and now had to move on. And finally, he mentions character customization, the idea of being able to roleplay, customize your story, and be able to do something in your way. Any of those that you want to drill in on?
Yeah, there's a line in there in his unabridged comment about getting the dopamine hit from these RPG ideas. And this is a major disconnect between me and Andrew and RPG enjoyers.
And that's why you don't like him. Sometimes you just say things, see if they stick.
This one doesn't stick. Andrew, I love you.
Okay.
I don't like numbers.
Yeah.
I've long had this idea that is just very reductive, but I've long had this idea that I hold. That RPGs, that we shouldn't make games that are turn-based or stat-based anymore.
Hey, I think I agree with that.
And let me explain why, and then I'll immediately let me just put it out here first. That's not true. It's stupid. We should keep making these games. But here's how
But because we don't like them, they shouldn't be made.
Right. Here's how my mind attacks the idea. Final Fantasy 1, Dragon Warrior, things like this. You couldn't do...
Star Ocean. Fantasy Star.
Star Tropics? Actually, I don't know what kind of games.
Kirby Superstar.
You had to do the turn-based battles with the Spoony Bard and the Slime and the fucking Chocobo and all these things. You had to do it via numbers because essentially all you had the ability to create was a digitized version of a pen and paper role-playing game.
Yeah.
That's not true anymore. So I look at Final Fantasy 16 and say, finally, they've made a Final Fantasy game for me. Because they retain the grandeur of a role-playing game, they retain the narrative focus, they retain the scope of systems, they retain all of this. But they make it a real-time game because they can now.
Yeah.
You tell me they're going to make Final Fantasy 1 on NES a real-time action game? Doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, just as there's an appetite for me to play a retro-style platformer, there's a huge appetite for classical turn-based role-playing game. So I'm not discounting that. But for me, I think we've moved beyond the need for numbers.
They should be on the backside and not on the forefront.
Yeah, so I just
that is something that I agree with on a very subjective level, and it's why I don't try to get into all the Dragon Quest games. It's why there are very select few. No,
binge the entire
that's
series.
Not going to fucking happen. That's why there are very select few turn-based RPGs that I love, and I even contest that one of my favorite franchises of all time, Pokemon, which is a turn-based RPG series, I don't like the gameplay of. And it wasn't until they gave me a little bit more freedom with the control in
my Pokemon
Legends Arceus. In something like Legends Arceus that I was like, it's like Pokemon evolved, pun intended. And I'm like, oh, hallelujah, you fucking did it. Game Freak. Because I feel the same way that you do about Final Fantasy 16 and why that game and by extension backwards, 7 Remake and 15
The other
appeal
ones
to
I
me
like.
a lot more. Have you tried 15?
Yeah.
Oh, well, fucking hot dog. Let's also go to my brother, who actually submitted. He submitted to me, and he said something very interesting. Because I actually had this conversation with him in real life. I was like, we're having this topic tonight. I want to hear your thoughts on it. Because he's a very different kind of game player than everyone that I know.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like fucking platinum in Valorant. And I'm like, brother man, you do this until 4 a.m. and I would sooner jump out my window. It wouldn't do much damage because my window's not too high, but I'd rather do it.
You'd not fall very far out your window.
No.
You'd fall further
It's
jumping
like
from the
10
top of that stairs than you would going out your window.
It's true. He says, and this is actually not related to him playing a lot of Valorant, because he confessed to me that he plays that because his friends play it and not because he actually really loves it. But he says, the most compelling aspect of games to me, whether it be video games or board games, single player or multiplayer, is the impact I get to make on the world that it takes place in. My favorite games I've played are Minecraft, Sid Meier's Civilization, Ark Survival Evolved, Fallout 4, and Pokemon. I can safely chalk up my interest to the first four being able to shape the world from scratch and have the environment be the one that's a direct byproduct of my interaction with it. Minecraft building, figuring out the physics and the foundation of snapping an arc construction, creating expansive settlements in Fallout, and completely disregarding the actual gameplay. Have been some of the only aspects of games that completely immerse me in their gameplay. It's having the opportunity to take a world and have impact on its progression and design that makes me enjoy a game, whether it's single player or multiplayer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is
right like this.
This is an idea that I used to agree a lot more with.
Yeah.
Again, I think it speaks to the Tears of the Kingdom sort of discontinuity in my taste.
Definitely.
Or the evolution of it. Because I don't necessarily need to leave an impact on the world anymore. I don't think. Mm-hmm. I got a world around here I got to leave an impact on. You know?
You're not gonna. No, but I find this very interesting because it fits very nicely into the games I've watched my brother play for a long fucking time.
Yeah.
And my brother is a fascinating game player in that he has 500, 600 hours in Ark and Fallout and Minecraft. And he's done this over like 130 different worlds. He loves Ark specifically. I will walk into his room and he's always on like 2 health and he's always got a dodo and a level 2 triceratops. I'm like, what are you doing? Haven't you been playing this game for 200 hours? He's like, oh, I started a new world last week. And then he does that every time I walk into his room. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Play the game, build up a base. But he doesn't find that drive because he likes watching the world evolve from, oh god, everything hates me and I need to build a thatch hut or dig into the side of a Minecraft mountain to, I have built a settlement. I've conquered this area and it is now mine to shape and mold as I please. And I find that very fascinating because that is the exact opposite of my replayability thing or it's the same thing about my replayability things. Like I hate the idea of knocking down all my progress and just like having to do the same shit again. I'm like, god damn it. Of course I have done it before. I've replayed Pokemon games. I've replayed Minecraft worlds, but it's a very different way of engaging with the game than the way I play.
Yeah, it's sort of the catharsis of process.
Sure.
Like I find the process of replaying a lot of my favorite, the process of playing Tetris is very satisfying. Now yeah. I'm also happy to restart that because I'm going to reach the end of journey mode in an hour and a half, and then I can come back in a couple of weeks and do it over again. My sister does a really interesting thing where when she plays Animal Crossing, she has hundreds of hours on Animal Crossing, but every couple of months she just deletes her town. Yeah. Just makes a new town. And for a lot of people, there's a catharsis in the process of these long-term games. Now, for me, in a long-term game, I want to always be climbing. I want to always climb and climb and climb. Like in Animal Crossing, I don't want to delete. I don't want to start over. I want to keep building.
Yep. And you want to have those memories. You want to be able to see on your save file, I started this on the day that came out. I've existed in it for that amount of time.
It's a different sort of experience because like when I'm playing Star Fox 64, I'm taking agency over my run, but ultimately it's just my run of the game Star Fox 64. Animal Crossing is me curating and building my town, my island, and that's mine, and I feel a sense of ownership over it, and a sense of loss if it were to be destroyed
absolutely.
somehow.
I'm in the same place. Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of not only am I not interested in these massively endless games anymore, but
Mm-hmm.
when I am, a la Animal Crossing, I want to just we're moving forward.
Yeah.
We're never going to go
Definitely.
back to square zero in Animal
Yeah.
Crossing.
I don't want to see my Pokedex go from 900 to 0 again. Like that would cause that would cause psychic damage to me.
I've completed the
Very
Pokedex
acute
one
level.
time, and I can't do it again.
No, absolutely not. I'm in the
I-
exact same place.
Actually, I think I did it a second. I think during COVID, I completed the Sword and Shield Pokedex too. I think X and Y is the one that I did first. I think I also did Sword and Shield over COVID.
Yeah.
It's not important
Um,
at all if I did or didn't.
The final thing comes from Sith Scott, who's getting to be a good friend. I'm creating like a hierarchy here. I don't know if this is a good idea, but it's too late. The bit's too far gone. Sorry, guys. Who says, oh wait, I was reading my own fucking tuckaways and I got lost in how amazing they are. His points are he prefers character-driven narratives, which is being in the shoes of someone else, which I think is to the point of what I was saying earlier of having an impact on a character's story, and also progression, like leveling and learning upgrade systems. And I wrote underlined in red a quote here from him that is sort of on what he doesn't like is gameplay is nice, but it isn't necessarily a big focus for me, which I think is a very interesting encapsulation of talking about a game but saying gameplay's okay. Yeah, I can take it or leave it.
Yeah.
And he's talking about a video game, but it shows, and I think through the difference between you and I that we've sort of delved into here, that we've reached a point in the widespreadness and the variety of video games that there are people who play hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of video games and don't really care about the gameplay. And that is a fascinating evolution, because you simply could not have said that 20 years ago. You could not be a video game fan only for story. They didn't exist.
Yeah.
But we've reached a point now where there's so many different games that an individual such as Sith Scott can make such a bold claim.
I also like that we're at a point where you can sort of disregard gameplay entirely if you just want to involve story, have story motivate the experience.
Yeah.
Think about like Citizen Sleeper. Now, Citizen Sleeper is a very engaged game because you are making a lot of very small decisions in Citizen Sleeper. And I think Citizen Sleeper is one of the greatest narratives ever penned. I'm also part of Lost and Cult for making the official book and tabletop game for Citizen Sleeper, so maybe I'm biased, but I love Citizen Sleeper. But before we start working on the book, everybody, just so you know.
It's true. I can attest.
I think that's so exciting that someone like Gareth can say, hey, I'm going to interpret gameplay in a different way. Actually, What's interesting is Citizen Sleeper began as a pen and paper RPG. So in some ways, we've reached a point where we can... Is this a good example? Because I feel like you could have always made a Citizen Sleeper in some way or another.
I don't know how to play it.
Let me put it this way. We're at a...
I have downloaded it on my Switch OLED. My Nintendo Switch OLED system.
Oh, you should just play it. Tucker, I think you would adore Citizen Sleeper. You can beat it in one day. I beat it in one sitting. Just so you know. Actually, I'm going to make a recommendation to you.
Oh, Christ. This never ends up well.
I played Citizen Sleeper on a flight, and I thought that was perfect.
My flight is very short. I have a 2-hour flight. I don't know if
You're
that's...
going to have to play it very quickly.
Okay, we got the idea. I'll play Citizen Sleeper soon, and we will reconvene. Yeah. But I like this idea that you're getting at, that we were actually just talking about how pen and paper narratives or RPGs had to be translated through numbers exclusively in the NES and SNES era. But we've reached the point where you can skip the gameplay part and go straight to an interactive text narrative through visuals only and not through numbers increasing.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. We've gotten to a point where there's not only the tools to, but the acceptance of so many different modes of storytelling. Because how Citizen Sleeper and Legends of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Immortality and The Last of Us approach story, those are 4 completely different approaches. And I think all are really amazing for different reasons.
Yeah.
So I think that's super cool. I also hate subsystems. Scott was talking about like stats and leveling shit up and all that.
Yeah.
I don't like any of that. And it goes back to the point I was making before. Discard it. I like the only stat I like in any video game is the stash stat in Mario and Luigi, because you can make STACHE as in mustache.
Yeah.
There's you can improve the stash
Something you
stat.
barely have. Yeah, that's funny. And
It's funny.
That's goofy, so it should be included.
Yeah, if you could just
if you meet the goofiness bar, if you're using a stash stat or you got Turgle in your game, you're okay to go. You're below that, you might want to reconsider.
It's part of why I also like Earthbound, because you'll be doing a turn-based battle in Earthbound, and one of the enemies on the enemy's turn, it'll be like, meth addicted juggler was looking at an ant on the sidewalk, and that's what they did for their turn.
Yeah,
you see what I mean?
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I want to draw this to one final point, which is something I've thought a lot about as a student of the industry. I'm graduated, but I'm going to the College of Video Games now. I study daily, which I did not do in college. Is the idea that games have diversified to the point where there are some games that people don't consider games, and I'm like, my brother in Christ is an interactive piece of media. What the fuck else are you going to call it? And that, for me, is nowhere more apparent than the largely maligned but also surprisingly popular walking simulator genre. A genre of games that you don't have a particular affinity for, but one that I continually seek out and consider some of my favorite experiences, because to me, there are the embodiment of why an interactive narrative can be more engaging than a quote-unquote traditionally told one through a book or a film or whatever.
Yeah.
Is the idea of the world not, or the story not happening without you. It is not a passive.
Yeah.
Why are you fucking smirking?
No, you keep talking.
Okay. The idea that you have to interact with it and you can take it at your own pace, no matter how simple it is. If I wanted to, I could walk into Gone Home and just spend 3 hours walking around the front room if I wanted to. I wouldn't do that, but I could. And it's because it's an interactive game. And I couldn't find the next thing unless I was aware enough of my surroundings and the control of my character, no matter how basic it is, to find the next room, to discover, open the drawer, find the note, learn more about the story because I interacted with it. And to me, that is what makes video games as a medium so special, is that you can be the story of Pac-Man defeating ghosts by only moving a joystick, or you can do the story of Gone Home, which is ostensibly only moving the joystick, but it is so minimal interactivity, but it's just enough there to where I love that diversity in the video game sphere.
Yeah, I think about, and I think this is kind of where our point about uniqueness comes to term, to use a pregnancy metaphor.
Jesus Christ.
I don't know why that was in my head.
Don't look at his search history.
The space that people have to try new things is really exciting. Yeah. I think about Before Your Eyes.
Good God, yeah.
Which is such a moving game. And
though you don't move.
You don't move. Well, your eyelids move, and that's the core of how you locomote. I also think there's this game that I can't remember the name of. It has tap in the title. It was released on Wii, and here's how you played it. And this, people will know what I'm talking about. Or maybe they won't, because I think it's very niche.
Amiibo Tap, Nintendo's greatest bits.
No. You took a tissue box.
I did?
You took a tissue box, and you took your Wii remote, and you put your Wii remote upside down top of the tissue box. And then
I'm not here to this.
And then you tap the tissue box to, like, vibrate the controller. And you controlled the game.
The Wii remote had sensitive enough vibration for that?
Yeah. You played the game by hitting the surface of a box around the Wii remote.
Yeah. What this reminds me of is the guy who plays Winston with a banana or whatever.
Yeah. But I like that there's so many different niches, input methods, storefronts that facilitate different scales of games.
Yeah.
Just all of these different things you can explore. There is a game that John Cartwright made a video about where you put your Joy-Con in a toilet paper roll and you hold the toilet paper roll in a cookie sheet. And the premise of the game is you're a toilet paper roll and there's a guy who's shitting and he's a wipe and doesn't have a toilet roll. And so you
I'm buying
navigate
that tonight.
platforming levels by rolling your Joy-Con in a toilet paper roll back and forth like a big cookie sheet or something.
That's one of the greatest things I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, to get down to the guy who's shitting.
Yeah.
It's kind of a low rent on a production value level, but it's interesting. I think it's just cool that you can make all kinds of different games.
Absolutely.
And I also think that I like walking simulators more if they're called perambulating simulators.
On that note, I feel like we've reached the end of our journey here. We've explored every comment that was given to us. We've explored all of my notes.
Yep.
I actually don't think I have any more words in my brain. I think this is the last. I think this is my last foray. Bye, guys. Well, we will see you guys in other videos. I think we unearthed some fruits to bear and thoughts. And we hope to continue doing that in the future. Thank you very much for watching.
You're welcome.
Problem solved? Just a big cable. Everything can be fixed with a big cable.
Big white.
Joe Biden.
Big.
Big what? Huh?
Big white.
Throbbing cable?
Yeah. I believe that's Hunter Biden's motto. Here's the thing about Hunter Biden, right? Everyone's always like, oh man, look at what an awful person Hunter Biden is. Isn't he so lame as he's like naked with his big cock out and a bunch of women and drugs around him?
Mm-hmm.
Hunter Biden's cool. I think that's what conservatives forget.
He's got the Jordan Belfort energy.
He does.
All right. Did you find the Dougal Gawk?
I had Dougal your gawk.
Did you open the B.O.B. Dougal Gawk?
Okay, I feel like you should do an intro for this. I think this is your babe. Your babe.
My babe.
I think it's funny how people in the olden times used to refer to babies as babes.
Sure.
It's one of my
Babe
favorite.
in a manger?
Yeah.
Yeah. You think about mangers sometimes?
Tucker, I have thoughts about mangers that the Holy Spirit would consider impure.
Manger my nuts. Manger.
That's great. That means eat in French.
Good job. Good work, Abram. Good boy.
Are you a Frenchman? Are you a Frenchman?
I used to learn French on Rosetta Stone program.
What were you? A fucking knuckle dragon loser?
Yeah, still am. In many ways.
My knuckles often dragging. You always hear me coming because I'm going down the street going ow ow ow. Ow.
Fuck, my fucking knuckles! Ow, my god, the fucking knuckles! Oh god.
All right, do the intro, bitch boy. I mean
what?
friend.
I mean what? I mean nipple. I mean huh? I mean knuckle.